Well, hi, I'm Rick Reiff, and welcome to Inside OC. A savvy granny who kept her watchdog eye on the county for years is teaming up with an Orange County supervisor to establish a commission to watch over local elections. Is that good government or bad bureaucracy? We'll examine on Consider This, but first, more bad news for newspapers. Across the country, papers are losing their readers, advertisers, and reporters. The LA Times has lost its third editor in as many years in a dispute over budget cuts, and the Register is cutting back on its business section and killing the abridged OC Post. Stop the Presses is taking on a whole new meaning. And here to discuss are James Flanigan, longtime business writer for the Los Angeles Times and now a contributing columnist to the New York Times, and Richard Reisman, publisher of the Orange County Business Journal. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good to be here.
Rick? Jim, will the pain ever end for daily newspapers?
The pain won't end for some newspapers. Everything has to be transformed. The internet has changed everything. It has taken away. It's the latest, but it's the most serious thing, taking away whatever monopoly or market edge position newspapers have, classified advertising. Now, there are newspapers that are doing well. Maybe they're national. Wall Street Journal,
one.
New York Times.
All right. Other than
Other than the one I work for.
The Wall Street Journal is not doing well. They're doing poorly financially.
Poorly financially defined as what?
They don't make profit.
So, Richard,
the Wall Street Journal doesn't make a profit?
It makes very small profit.
So maybe there's one newspaper, perhaps
wrong.
two, depending on how you want to define it. But in general, daily newspapers are having a terrible time. It's been talked about all the time. As the internet rises, daily newspapers seem to be losing out. Do you see any bottom to this?
Well, I think it does make sense to make some distinctions. The large metropolitan daily newspapers, I'm pretty certain in the top 50 markets, all of them had declines in revenue this year. So the larger metropolitan daily newspapers are definitely having a lot of problems, and I think that's probably the focus of what we're talking about. That would include the Register and the Times. In fact, I think every metropolitan newspaper in the Southern California area had declines of 10% or more in the last fiscal year. But the smaller community newspapers aren't being hurt as much, and niche publications aren't being hit as much.
And we'll get into niche publications in a moment. Let's take a look here, though, at the big boy. Orange County Register, this is their business section. This will soon disappear. It's going to go right into this thing, which is called the front section, and it's just going to disappear and be thrown in there. Unprecedented to have a pull-out business section disappear. And this is OC Post, often seen the last year or so on KOCE. And this was their attempt to answer this new age and come up with a tabloid, a little easy to read. It is now going to go away. What do you make of this, Jim?
Well, first of all, the business section of the Los Angeles Times used to be behind sports for many years. So it was a new thing for business sections to become separate and become prominent. And they increased business reportage because they thought, hey, this is a good market. There was great interest in it. And they didn't get the ads. And now they're not getting the ads, so now they say, well, let's fold it in for, I guess, to save newsprint or something.
So that's interesting. Now, do you know that because you're smarter than me or older than me, that there was a time when you didn't have these standalone business sections?
I go back a long way. Yeah.
But since about the 80s or so, roughly, so for about 25 years we've had these sections, and now they're disappearing. Richard, you talk about what do you think of OC Post? What do you think of that attempt?
Well, I don't really have much to say on the Orange County Post, but if you want to talk about the business section, that's very interesting. The people at Freedom and the Orange County Register, I think, are smart people. And I talk to them, we're friendly. And I talk to a lot of the publishers around Southern California. But they realize they need to do what's their strength. They need to play to their strength. And that's why you didn't mention this, but the Orange County Register is going to zone the local section, because they've been very successful against the Los Angeles Times, because that's what they do better than they do. And at the same time, they've recognized that when it comes to covering hard business, the Orange County Business Journal is better equipped to cover that than they are. So they're going to adapt to that.
Okay.
Why should a smaller newspaper be better equipped to cover local business? Or their business is not local anyway. Business in Orange County, to a great extent, your small to medium-sized entrepreneurial companies, they do business overseas. Why should a larger publication with the resources it has not be able to cover the waterfront better than the smaller Orange County Business Journal? I'm not disagreeing that
they actually are going to cover it. They're not going to discontinue covering business. It's just going to be in the main section.
Yeah,
but they're going to focus on the kind of business that's of relevance to their core audience. And the candid definition of their sweet spot would be people who own homes. It's a much larger population than just people who run businesses or own businesses. But when it comes to the kind of business covering businesses for people who are in business in Orange County, the Orange County Business Journal has created a community of interest that they're shying away from. When it comes to covering home loans, when it comes to covering what's going on in housing prices, the Orange County Register excels at that, and that's the kind of information that a large number of homeowners, all homeowners, want to read about, and that's their target.
That's called consumer.
So
that's
Jim,
their market.
Do you agree that newspapers have to start doing a better job of figuring out just who is our audience and what can we offer them?
Well, what the newspaper offers, the major newspaper, and the Orange County Business Journal, LA County Business, Los Angeles Business Journal and whatnot, newspapers offer credibility. And the credibility doesn't come because the reporters are better. It's because you have a professional reporter held to account by a professional editor. You have a whole system that you give information that is not opinion, but that is responsibly reported, and it can report, most especially it can report a local area, because nothing else can. Bill Gates once tried to do a website that covered the local areas, but he couldn't, because you need to have somebody with shoe leather to go over to City Hall and to police headquarters and so forth to cover. And that's what the newspapers have. They have this wonderful position of credibility. What we do is done with thought and care and all that, and they have to get closer to their audience and all that.
But Jim, that asset, that quality doesn't seem, that asset doesn't seem
people
to
are
be
not
helping
paying
them
enough
right
for
now.
it. No.
Richard, what about that? Is there, to some extent, the problems that newspapers have, is it self-inflicted? Are there some things that they should be doing better that they aren't?
Well, first of all, there is definitely the issue of the Internet taking classified advertising away.
Absolutely.
And that never happened before. Right. There was television, radio, but they didn't attack classified advertising. So that's different.
Right.
But the main point here is the fact that newspapers, some of them are doing a better job than others, but I think the Register has it right. They need to focus on who their market is, local news. They don't have people all over the world. They don't have people in Washington, D.C. And because what you get uniquely from a local newspaper, from your metropolitan daily newspaper, is coverage of your community. And the Business Journal has been successful because we've defined a community of just the people who are the business people in Orange County, and there's a social motivation. So long as I think newspapers will kind of create a sense of community and people will sort of connect to the other people in it, if people are just writing about Irvine in the paper that you read and you live in Irvine, that's going to be more meaningful to you than reading about a broader area.
On the other hand, Southern California, Los Angeles, Orange County, San Diego County, Inland Empire, this is a massive area. It's 22 million people. It is not only involved in the world, I'm writing a book about how it's the center of the world. There's a plug, okay? But it is the center of the global economy right now. It is a place that deserves a very large vision newspaper. And the Los Angeles Times tried to provide that, has had difficulty. It hasn't had difficulty covering the Iraq War. It does an excellent job covering the Iraq War, covering these events, covering Mexico, which is an important adjunct here. And covering China. And I believe that this, the readers, the people of Southern California do need to have an understanding, a good understanding of those places.
Well, as we talk
and
about
our interrelation.
As we talk about upheaval, one of the big changes at the LA Times, owned by Tribune Company, is the new owner, Sam Zell, the multi-billionaire who has taken it over.
Right.
Not a newspaper guy by background. And at the Wall Street Journal, Rupert Murdoch has taken over the great marquee Wall Street Journal. Are these good moves or bad news for the profession?
Well, Sam Zell is an excellent businessman. I have no idea what he's going to do with the LA Times. Tribune's ownership of the Times was, it was a disaster. It was a disaster for Tribune. One of the first things they did when they got hold of the paper, they brought in editors who didn't come from here, who didn't understand the place. They cut back their coverage and their editorial operation in Orange County. thinking that Orange County was the equivalent of a New York borough or something.
Richard, we're just about out of time, but quickly, what do you think? Sam Zell, Rupert Murdoch, good news or bad news for the newspaper industry?
It's going to be good news because they're sharp business people, and at the end of the day, you've got to sell what people want to buy. And the things that daily newspapers, metropolitan newspapers do uniquely is cover the local community. The biggest issue of the LA Times is their ego has made them want to compete with the New York Times and the Washington Post. And the fact is, people aren't going to read it because they cover those things. There's a lot of sources for that information. But if they do a good job covering Los Angeles, and I think Sam Zell is going to get that, then they'll attract readers.
How about Orange County?
I don't know. They've abandoned Orange County.
Focus on the reader. Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for coming on. The Insider's next, and then OC's campaign watchdog on Consider This. Now it's time for the OC Insider from the Orange County Business Journal. Well, they've taken our jobs, our technology, they're beating us in sports. But when it comes to global competition, this is the final insult. America has even lost its shopping edge. According to Forbes magazine, South Coast Plaza has lost its ranking as one of the 10 biggest shopping malls in the world. 7 of the biggest malls are now in China and the Philippines. Not a single U.S. mall is on the list. Well, speaking of malls, so far so good for the total makeover of Huntington Beach Mall. In just 3 years, the old and largely empty shopping center has become the lively Bellaterra Mall, bustling with brand name stores and restaurants. Now Bellaterra is planning to expand with new offices, 500 housing units, neighborhood shops, and more parking decks. And it's planning a major marketing campaign aimed at persuading Huntington Beach residents to save the gas and shop Bellaterra instead of South Coast Plaza or Fashion Island. Well, Chapman University's business school is named after businessman George Argyris. UCI's business school is named after marketing whiz Paul Mirage. Now OC's other major university, Cal State Fullerton, has a name on its school too, Stephen G. Mahalo. He's a Titan alum who made a killing as a communications entrepreneur. He just gave the business school $30 million on top of an earlier $4.5 million. Well, that's it for the Insider. What is Tin Cup? Consider This explains next.
On upcoming editions of Real Orange, State Assemblyman Todd Spitzer joins us to talk about the budget debate and other political wrangling in Sacramento.
Catholic Charities in Orange County puts its faith in the power of philanthropy.
And the chilling story of folks taking an ocean plunge in February for causes that will warm your heart.
Join us for those stories and more weeknights at 6:30 and 11 on Real Orange.
And joining me for another edition of Consider This, Mario Mainero, former dean of the Whittier Law School and now chief of staff for Orange County Supervisor John Moorlach. And back again, Republican pollster Adam Probolsky. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, Rick.
Mario, Tin Cup. I think of that Kevin Costner movie. Explain to me, we're hearing a lot about this in the newspaper. What does Tin Cup stand for and what is it?
In 1978, Shirley Grindle, a community activist, wrote the original Tin Cup, which stood for Time Is Now, Clean Up Politics. In 1978, the voters adopted the first version. In 1992, they adopted the second version with 85% of the vote in favor. The essence of it at this point is it imposes contribution limits on contributors to individual county-wide candidates, the supervisors, sheriff, DA, and those kinds of offices.
Do a lot of other places have these sort of Tin Cup provisions?
As a matter of fact, quite a few of our surrounding counties do in fact have campaign contribution limits.
So it limits how much you can spend on a local campaign. Adam, good idea, bad idea?
Really bad idea. Shirley Grindle, smart lady.
She doesn't say the same thing about you, you know.
Mr. Mainero suggests that she's a community activist. I call her a lobbyist. She's advocating for a position in government, and I think it's a very bad idea. It was based on or born out of the 1974 Political Reform Act, which specifically suggested that we should have some sort of provision to make sure that incumbents don't have an advantage. And I think what Tin Cup does, and this additional provision Tin Cup 2 does, is actually limit competition, and you end up basically taking away that healthy Republican democracy tenet, which is the opportunity to challenge incumbents.
What about that? This is a incumbent protection provision.
Well, I think we have to start with the fact that the train's already left the station on whether we have contribution limits. In 1976 with Buckley versus Vallejo, in 2002 with McConnell versus the FEC, the U.S. Supreme Court has
and nobody knows those as well as you do. I know that, Mark.
Well, they've upheld the constitutionality of campaign contribution limitations. So the issue really isn't whether we're going to have them. The issue is, are we going to bring them into a more modern campaign era? And that's all we're trying to do here.
Okay, so what is new now? We have Tin Cup, and this new thing is going to create a commission, right?
Well, actually, there are two parts to it. One part that we're hopefully going to have on the ballot are amendments to Tin Cup, amendments that I would expect even Adam to support. For example, they eliminate the aggregation of husband and wife contributions that actually unduly limited.
So in other words, a husband can give the limit and a wife can give the
exactly.
limit. And what is the limit? What is
currently $1,600. It was $1,000. It goes up every 2 years to the nearest $100 according to cost of living. Then the amendments would create a legal defense fund that would allow a county candidate to raise money to pay for defense of an election challenge. It would decriminalize the violations. Right now, there are criminal penalties. These are regulatory matters.
Yeah.
We shouldn't have the district attorney spending valuable resources on prosecuting. Instead of having the district attorney, we have suggested the creation of a professional, staff-driven kind of a commission that would instead have a regularized, consistent mode of interpretation and regulating of any violations.
Yeah. Staff-driven is another word for no real oversight outside of the reach of the voters, which is a bad idea. This commission would be made up of, in a very convoluted way, an association in Orange County would choose the pool of people. Former judges or presiding judges would have a say in how that's made up. It really takes away control from the voters. Just to give an example, one of the updated parts of this initiative, this measure, is to have bureaucrats use a ruler like this to measure a piece of direct mail or a flyer that you might get. So you're basically regulating what the Kinko's technician, copy technician might be making, the size of the picture of a candidate or how much surface space a candidate might have on a piece of direct mail or a flyer. That's not what government ought to be doing.
Well, I think Adam misses something. What he just referred to has been in the law for quite a few years. That's not an update at all. In terms of the staff part, all we are doing, in fact, we protect candidates because we literally state in the law that the staff, the executive director, does what Shirley does right now because nobody else is enforcing it. And that is, if she sees a potential violation like somebody's over by a few dollars, she calls them, says, look, you need to return it. They return it. It's remedied. It's over.
This is not just making the sausage. This is opening the sausage and looking at it. But let me ask you a more cosmic question, Mario, which is that here we've got this Tin Cup in Orange County. It's been in place since 1978. Since then, we've had Bob Citron in the bankruptcy. We've had a huge unfunded pension liability that you're working on right now. We've had lots of local officials go to jail. We've got a sheriff who's convicted. I mean, it doesn't seem like if the purpose is good government that this has prevented some really bad things from happening in government.
In fact, there's empirical evidence that it actually has worked in this sense. Although you point to 2 or 3 problems, for one, they weren't necessarily linked to campaign contributions. But before Tin Cup, there were 43 indictments of Orange County elected officials on campaign-related criminal convictions.
So we've had fewer then. Okay,
significantly fewer. But
by the way, let me correct. I did say the sheriff was convicted. Right. I meant to say the sheriff is indicted, and I knew Adam would correct me if I didn't correct myself.
Secondly, we looked to San Bernardino, which has no contribution limitations. They've had rampant corruption and that sort of thing. Finally, there's actually empirical evidence. In 2006, in an article in the Journal of Law, Economics and Policy, there was an empirical study done that showed a high statistical correlation between imposing campaign contribution limits and eliminating corrupt decision-making. This is empirical evidence, not anecdotes, not feelings.
I'm looking at Adam, and I don't think you're convincing Adam.
No.
I never will, I suspect, I tell given his business.
Well, and that's a good point. I practically apply the business of public affairs on a daily basis. And I think this ordinance and this commission may look very good on paper and may make for great fodder for a classroom exercise, but in the practical application, it does not work. It simply limits, it's government price controls on politics. It limits challengers. managers and it limits competition. I mean, a great example in this new commission, it suggests that people who are serving on the commission can have had no prior or current or even possibly future involvement in politics. If they want to, they've got to get off of it. I mean, you couldn't have served on a commission in the county. You couldn't have been working for the county. You couldn't have been involved in politics in the county to be involved in this. You're effectively putting in charge of regulating politics in the county people who have no idea what's going on or how politics are actually run.
In fact, we've depoliticized it. That's actually a very good point. We are depoliticizing it with a professional staff and with people who are not going to be sworn to go after people with a political agenda. Does this actually protect incumbents? No. It's the other way around. Incumbents have a natural advantage. For example, in the most recent supervisorial races, incumbents raise about $250 per person more than their challengers. However, without limits, you'd have that gap increase. More to the point, you would also have the ability for somebody to say the Irvine Company, which does a lot of business with the county, and I'm not saying they do this, but they'd have the ability to perhaps buy elections by spending $1 million on each of the 5 races, and then you'd have the perception, which the Supreme Court has said is an important consideration, the perception of a problem. This starts eliminating a lot of that. And as I said, the evidence is clear. When you have limitations, you have a reduction in corruption. And I think the voters understood that when they supported this with 85%.
Adam, both of you have invoked Shirley Grindle's name, and we just saw a little while ago a clip of her, and she is a 72-year-old grandmother and still a softball player, I might add. But that, you know, here's this citizen who has dutifully been making sure that politicians adhere to the campaign laws, and you come along, you know, highly paid consultant, and you put a bounty on this woman. I mean, you are beating up this citizen who, by the way, I invited on, and she doesn't like you, and she did not want to come on and dignify your presence. So you must have gotten under her skin. But are you picking on a senior citizen?
No, she puts herself out there as a lobbyist to advocate for positions in the county, and so I call it meddling. But
what's the bounty, by the way, that you put on her?
I suggest that she is the #1 lobbyist in Orange County, and that, you know, she may or may not be paid. I think she probably is. She has some special interests that she's working for.
She says not.
And she claims she's not, and that's yet to be proven. But she is very much advocating in a grand way for her position, for a special interest. My special interest is you know, a forward-looking, help our political system grow and give more opportunity to people. I think she's kind of driven by bitterness.
Mari, do you like Shirley? Do you like Shirley? You're working with her closely.
Actually, I do like her because you know what? She is lobbying. She's lobbying for the people of Orange County. She's lobbying for clean government. A lobbyist is someone who's paid to advance a particular position or candidate. She's not doing that. She's been enormously successful. She helped the county eliminate pay for play in terms of county contracts where, hey, if you have the right lobbyists who made enough money or gave enough money to the supervisors, you got that contract. She helped eliminate that. And, of course, her most recent success was leading very strongly to the resignation of Sheriff Corona by pointing out to the state attorney general that he was attempting to take improperly free legal services while he was sitting in office.
Which, by the way, is the height of hypocrisy, and arrogance that a government would pass a law that you can't defend yourself against a prosecution.
We are out of town. Shirley took down Mike Corona. That's it. You can watch this show and past shows by going to koce.org and clicking on Inside OC. My guests have been James Flanigan, Richard Reisman, Mainero, and Adam Probolsky. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again Inside OC.
Inside OC is brought to you by the following.
We have developed recent advances in breast cancer therapy that allow us to dramatically shrink the size of the tumor. At surgery, we remove a smaller tumor and preserve more of the breast.
Lennar.com. Today's new homes. Everything you want. Everything you need. That's the logic of Lennar. Lennar.com.
Where the land ends, a new lifestyle begins. A unique oceanfront resort. The Strand at Headlands offers custom home sites on the water's edge. The Strand at Headlands, Southern California's last beachfront community.
Support comes from City National Bank, providing complete financial solutions to entrepreneurs, their businesses, and their families on the way up in Orange County for more than 30 years. City National Bank believes in the power of the entrepreneur. On the web at cnb.com.
The City of Anaheim. Founded in 1857, Anaheim is Orange County's original city and California's 10th largest city. Information on living, working, or visiting Anaheim is available at www.anaheim.net.